My patience is running kind of thin with this administration constantly dangling where there's actually going to be some accountability for these elites. When are the indictments coming down? Let me know when the trial date's going to be for Barack Obama, because I don't think there's going to be one.
So recently, Dave Smith did a podcast about how the recent Russiagate news, the revelation that a document divulged by Tulsi Gabbard reveals that Trump administration and Biden administration officials knew that the whole Russiagate scandal was a hoax the entire time and went along with it anyways. He talks about how this is just a diversion from the Epstein case, which Trump is clearly trying to cover up. So I can't wait to hear his opinion on this. Let's take a look. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence. Of course, it was reported, what was it, a week or a little over a week ago, it was reported that the Justice Department had opened a criminal investigation into James Comey and John Brennan. These were the CIA and FBI directors, respectively, under Barack Obama. And the investigation was about the origins of Russiagate. Since that time, Tulsi Gabbard, just the other day, the director of national intelligence, she released a trove of documents alleging that there was that this was, I think her words were, a treasonous conspiracy led by Barack Obama, which is a pretty bold claim. And so anyway, I want to get into that claim a little bit and talk about it, because I have poured through some of these documents that she put out there, and there is some interesting stuff there for sure. So I think it's interesting to discuss all of it. But I guess the first thing you got to say, it's almost impossible not to, is that this just seems like an obvious attempt to throw the scent off Epstein. And it almost feels like, and obviously I'm speculating a little bit here, but like the timing is pretty obvious. But it seems like they kind of know on some level. I think they know what we've been talking about for the last few episodes is a real phenomenon. Donald Trump just, I think it was yesterday, it might have been earlier today, I don't know if you saw this, but he posted about how his approval numbers haven't gone down from the Epstein thing and how it's really not a big deal. And it's just this dynamic where you're like, yeah, but dude, you posting this totally disproves your claim.
That's so true. And I think they're so right. This has caused uproar, not only within the MAGA group that supports Trump, but also dissidents that supported Trump. You know, a lot of dissidents peeling off over this and how Trump's handling this. But not only that, some of Trump's fiercest supporters, like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens and Matt Walsh and Steve Bannon and Alex Jones, have all had serious issues about how this is being handled. And it's not just the top influencers. You can see this play out in Twitter and independent media spaces all over. And the poll data suggests that a lot of Trump's core base hates how he's handling this and hates the fact he's calling this a Democratic hoax, which is ridiculous. No one believes that, not even his most loyal, zealous supporters. For all the talk of MAGA being a cult, it doesn't seem like many of his supporters buy at least that part of it, and they shouldn't, because the Democrats wouldn't touch this story. The Democrats wouldn't use the Epstein story against Trump, even though Epstein's death, you know, he killed himself, happened during Trump's term, and the investigation started during Trump's term. So Dave's exactly right. I can't help but think that this is one of the diversionary tactics that's being used. There are others too. Sagar and Jetty pointed out on the Flagrant podcast that, you know, just a day after Trump was saying at the press conference, I can't believe you're talking about Epstein. Why are you talking about Epstein? We have all these other important things. You shouldn't talk about Epstein. The next day, he went directly to tweeting about revoking Rosie O'Donnell's citizenship. So that's what we get here. This isn't even serious, and Dave's right about the timing. I think there's also something, you know, not so coincidental about the fact that the big, beautiful bill passed a few days before, you know, the DOJ and FBI came out with this Epstein memo that said nothing to see here. So, yeah.
Like, what issue ever does Donald Trump ever talk about? Like, why would he even be talking about an issue that didn't hurt him at all to prove that it actually didn't hurt him? It's like, yeah, you're talking about this because actually you, and I think a lot of the people around you, are concerned about it. And it seemed like they needed something else that had that kind of that allure of we're going after the elites, we're going after the deep state, we're going after the real criminals who real like it's like they know on some level that their whole existence has to it's predicated on being justified by some of that spirit, having some spirit of we're bringing down the real deep state criminals. That's coming, you know, so stick with us because that's coming. And it does seem like that's the purpose that this serves. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying I'm against this. Nobody is more for this than me and you, Rob. Like actual justice for the people who framed Donald Trump, and that's something else we could get into. But my first take has to be: it just seems obviously like get back on board. The plan trusters are back in control. Just trust the plan a little bit more. And
Yeah, there's no doubt about this. Dave's exactly right here. This has the veneer of being in the same atmosphere of, you know, I'm actually trying to root out corruption and here's the proof. You get this document. We're not going to prosecute any of these people. You know, there was, you know, a special investigation launched into Comey and Brennan, right? But, you know, when's the indictment coming? When are the charges coming? They've talked about Obama. Well, you know, the first date that Obama has in court is the day that I concede to you that you are right. You actually are trying to root out the evil in Washington that was complicit in this hoax. And it truly was a hoax that gripped the entire country for 2+ years, maybe even 3 years of madness and lunacy, to say that the president was somehow working on behalf of the Russian government while he was arming Ukraine. It just, nothing about it ever made sense, and it never will. I'm glad, like Dave, that they're divulging this, but certainly it is to deflect from the Epstein story, which is a cover-up. It's a cover-up on the part of Trump. It was a cover-up on the part of Biden. We're never going to get clear answers as to who his clients were, you know, what information came from those searches, what information Epstein revealed as an FBI informant. That happened twice, not only after the Tower Capital Ponzi scheme in which Epstein acted as an informant, but also as a condition to his first child molestation plea deal, which was a sweetheart deal, but he agreed to provide the DOJ with information. We'll never learn that. We'll never learn his ties to the intelligence community, etc. And it is a deflection. For all the talk about how Trump wanted to drain the swamp, and that's kind of become a meme because he hasn't done that, he won't do that, and they don't even talk about that as a mantra anymore. You know, you only use America first, and that's become a meme too because clearly the objective is Israel first in so many regards.
And don't worry, there'll be some payoff at the end of this. Yeah, isn't this? It'd be like if they gave us something and we went, man, I was so naive to think that Ehud Barak, the former prime minister and head of intelligence for Israel, the fact that he was like staying at Jeffrey Epstein's house, I thought that was like a big deal, but turns out there's a totally legitimate reason for all of that. You know, like I'd love to get that reason, but then the reason is like, shut up.
It's a Democratic hoax. Nothing to see here. There were no Epstein files. Just, these are not the droids you're looking for. These are not the clients you're looking for. That's exactly what the feds are doing. They're not pretending. You know, even for them to say that this is a Democratic hoax is so ridiculous. I can't believe they've even stuck to that several times. And Trump has stuck that into every single message, including the message that said, hey, we're going to try to get the answers from grand jury testimony, which, by the way, is relying on a judge that might not grant it, will take months, and will likely result in tons of redacted files anyways, and it won't lead us to the answers that we want. We want what the FBI already is known to have. We know that because of documented facts. And it's stuff that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi talked about in the run-up to this campaign.
Shut up and trust us. And you're like, well, that didn't really settle my concerns at all. Well, look, you know, we have particular interest in this story because me and you really did focus on this story for years of this show. This was the biggest story that you know, it's hard. I'm going all the way back now to like, as is Tulsi Gabbard in these documents that she's released, we're going back to like 2017. And I understand when you're living in 2025, that this is 8 years ago, might as well be 80 years ago when it's 8 years ago. But you have to, if you could try to understand where me and Rob were coming from, you have to go back to a world where this is before there were lockdowns. You know, this is before the government instituted totalitarianism and made it a crime to go to work or have a funeral for your dad because we had to fight the flu. And Then after that, they forced an experimental, vaccine on people. And then the president of the United States was senile and they were lying to you and telling you he wasn't. And then the current president of the United States was dodging bullets on national TV. And then and look, there's just been a lot going on. So if you could try to understand that 80 years ago, in the year 2017, when the intelligence community framed the sitting president of the United States of America for treason, that was a big deal. Back then, that was big news. Today, that's like a Tuesday. But back then, it seemed like a really big deal.
Yeah, this gripped the entire country for 2+ years, like he said, and no one's really had to apologize for it. The only guy that's ever gone down for it, as far as I'm aware, it's the FBI agent that submitted the FISA application to investigate Trump and omitted the fact that they knew that Carter Page was working with the CIA. He wasn't a Russian agent whatsoever, despite all the accusations. And like it's been said so many times in this before, and Dave and Robbie have talked about it, is this whole thing started off as a Democratic, operation, an investigatory investigation into Trump and his past to try to dig up dirt. It was an oppositional project, and it spun out of control. I shouldn't even say that. It was under the control of ill-designing people trying to remove the sitting president. And I have lots of critiques for Trump, but this was clearly an underhanded maneuver to undermine a president that the deep state didn't like. In many ways, there are some similarities to how the deep state treated Kennedy, although, they weren't as successful when it comes to Trump as they were with Kennedy of removing him from this earth. Though I think they probably tried.
And of course, that is actually a pretty big deal. And the Russiagate, the whole scam was enormously consequential. Like, it's really hard to overstate how much that it served like several purposes. Number one, it kept the corporate media afloat for like 3 more years when they were on their deathbed. It was like a very effective chemotherapy for the corporate media. And they got huge ratings because, again, this is pre-COVID and pre-Biden dementia, where although a lot of people were waking up to how corrupt this system is, those two events really helped propel that. And at the time, the Russiagate was such a bold claim that it got huge ratings for CNN and MSNBC, because it was like, back then, again, long time ago, but back then, people still, it seemed like the average person, if they heard that claim, they would go, well, they can't just be entirely making this up. Like the claim from the corporate media was that the 2016 election, which remember had just happened, this was the overthrowing of the US government by a hostile foreign power. And the person currently occupying the Oval Office was in on the conspiracy.
Yeah, this was the biggest thing since Russiagate. The corporate media took this and ran with it. Rachel Maddow couldn't stop talking about it. Joe Scarborough, Don Lemon, all these people, right? This was the biggest story in Washington for years and years and years. It constantly came up over and over and over. For everyone complaining about how much the Epstein story's been in the news, especially lately and over the years, that is dwarfed by Russiagate in so many ways. Russiagate was the main story against Trump. And as we know, it was a hoax. It was a product of the deep state, an entitled and evil bureaucratic class that wanted to push its own agenda despite the electoral will of the people. And I'm not big on democracy at all, but, I guess I pick, the electoral college over the deep state and what the deep state's aims are if the two conflict with each other. So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
That Vladimir Putin hacked our elections. Hillary Clinton was supposed to win, but he flipped the results to put Donald Trump in, who, by the way, was a willing participant in this conspiracy. This was the claim that was run across every major newspaper, every major news TV channel. I mean, it dominated for over 3 years. Trump-Russia collusion was the story. And then they, down to when Mueller was getting ready to release his findings after 3 years or whatever it had been, and up until like the week that he testified before Congress and released the Mueller report, You had John Brennan, who's being criminally investigated now, is Obama's CIA director. He was on TV saying that Trump himself and his family members were going to be let off in handcuffs on national television. Like, the former head of the CIA was telling the American people that that's what we're about to witness. A report's going to come back and be like, yeah, this guy is not the legitimate president. He was in on a conspiracy.
Absolutely. I mean, he's not even hyperbolizing. It seems crazy now, but you look back to those years and that's how it played out. You know, if people in the future, I think a few generations later, look back at this time in history, they're going to say that Russiagate is the beginning of the time in which the corporate media went on life support, because that really is when people started to have some doubts on this system. And then that was compounded by the COVID regime, the Sharp as a tax scam, the Jan 6 insurrection narrative, all these absurd mainstream status quo kind of orthodox narratives about politics and how politics is playing out and progressing were just total farces. And I think people in the future will look back on that and see, hey, this is what spurred the growth of the independent media, which we're now seeing, you know, growing to maximum proportions, where people like Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson have not only unlimited more ratings and better ratings, but more trust among the people in general compared to those stooges on MSNBC.
And then, of course, Mueller releases his report and testifies before Congress, and he has none of that. He has none of that. He says there's no evidence that that Donald Trump was involved in this conspiracy, and he's not recommending any charges, and that, you know, essentially he threw them a bone in the report by saying, like, there were some instances where what he did could be considered obstruction of justice. Like, in other words, he was obstructing the investigation. But in terms of the actual investigation, like, we don't have anything. And
well, they said obstruction of Congress, actually. I don't think it's justice. If I remember back to those times, one of the charges against Trump in terms of his impeachment was he obstructed Congress. And, well, if you look at let's take this back to the basics. If you look at the Constitution, the president has the ability to obstruct Congress, not only in terms of the veto power, but also, you know, recommending policies that Congress might not want. Of course, Congress has the ability, the sole ability to legislate. That's been done away with too. But part of the president's job is to obstruct Congress by the Constitution, by the way. He can veto bills and basically turn down legislation that they send to his desk. He can also enter into treaties. They're subject to the advice and consent of the Senate, but it might be obstructing large portions of Congress to get into them. Certainly that was the case with Obama when he set up the JCPOA in 2015. So not to go down this road too far, but I think it was obstruction of Congress that they were hanging their hats on against Trump.
That was already a big enough blow, just if you were just paying attention, that it really did destroy. I mean, this was a big part of what started to really destroy the credibility of the corporate media in the eyes of the American people.
Yeah.
But then, of course, Rob, as you well know, the story, as we had been covering the whole time, is actually much, much worse than that. It's much worse than just, oh, we investigated it but couldn't find anything there. And then it turns out, which, again, we already knew a lot of this information, but this was really solidified in the Durham report, where you go, oh, no, it was actually much more than that. They knew this wasn't true the whole time.
Yeah, that's what the Durham report confirmed, and the Durham report isn't widely read, but it shows that Hillary Clinton and Obama were told that this is a farce. And we know after that they were told that this whole thing was a farce, they kept going forward, pretending it was true, trying to drag Trump for it, try to call him a Russian asset. That was the standard line, and they did it after they were briefed on this. That's how duplicitous this whole scheme was. It really is incredible, and they'll never have to apologize for it. You know, mainstream media won't bring it up. You know, who even knows about the Durham report? Only dissidents, as far as I'm concerned.
And the FBI and the CIA absolutely conspired to frame Donald Trump. There was never any confusion. And all of the stuff that they were doing was, you know, do you remember, Rob? You remember how long it went for the 3 years where they would even start reporting it and just listing the number of indictments that had come from the investigation, and almost reporting it as if that indicated that that meant anything, because what happens, they're investigating the president and his whole campaign team, so they started finding like, oh, this guy didn't pay his taxes, this guy was involved in some financial, but it was all these things that had absolutely nothing to do with colluding with the Russians to overthrow an American election. So they would just go, we've already got 25 indictments out of this, and you'd be like, yeah, but you're saying Roger Stone cheated on his taxes in 1987. That has nothing to do with anything. Or you got a guy who lied to Congress, but the lie had absolutely nothing to do with Russia or the election or anything. So they did this over, and then anyway, yes, it became more and more apparent, and there was just the evidence just built and built and built that this was a total frame job, and that's what it was. And there's already essentially enough evidence before Tulsi Gabbard released any of this for us to know it, but now she's released some more. So look, we could get into what she's released here, but I guess I would just say that I do think this is a shameless attempt to distract from the Jeffrey Epstein debacle and the cover-up of that pedophilia ring. And I think that, look, I'll say this, I hope I'm wrong here. I will gladly eat my words on this. I don't think anyone's going to be held accountable for this. I think this is going to be one more government investigation. They're making the claims, just like Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard and Dan Bongino and Donald Trump himself. They've made all these claims about all of these crimes that were committed by people in the intelligence agencies, by people in the permanent government. Nobody gets held accountable.
Yeah, no doubt whatsoever. I have a bold prediction, guys. Listen to this. I know this is going out on a limb, but here's my prediction. Government will investigate government and find out that government had engaged in no wrongdoing. That's what's going to happen. Comey and Brennan aren't going to suffer. Obama's not going to suffer. They're not going to be indicted or charged or have any jail time. They're not even going to have to apologize for this, for the same reasons that the COVID criminals won't have to apologize for this. And I know that Fauci and some others got blanket pardons. There's the Otto Penn scandal that goes along with that, clearly showing that Biden almost certainly didn't have the wherewithal to know that his signature was being put on these pardons, but nonetheless, those people aren't going to have to pay. Same goes for this. They all protect each other. They might dangle it out there for theatrics. Hey, look at this. We're rooting out the swamp creatures. We're holding them accountable. We're exposing them. We're ruining their reputations. But, we're not going to charge them. That's exactly what you're going to see from this too. I think Dave is spot on this prediction.
For it. And so right now, in a way, the gauntlet's been laid down. Tulsi Gabbard just said, I've got evidence of treason. I mean, I think she's misusing the term treason, but maybe sedition, but whatever. Clearly, like, serious crimes were committed. If you want to look into treason, Obama and Brennan did commit treason in Syria. We could get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, they aided and abetted the enemies of the United States. That's the definition of treason in Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution, which says aiding or abetting enemies in times of war, right? It doesn't say that exactly. It says that it's aiding or providing aid to the enemy, right? Or comfort to the enemy. And guess what happened? The U.S. funded ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria against the Sunni regime, against Assad, because Israel wanted to overthrow Assad. They had the whole propaganda. He gassed his own people. You had neocons in the U.S. that wanted to overthrow Assad, a lot of them on behalf of Israel, and they aided Al-Qaeda. There's even pictures with John McCain and Al-Qaeda fighters. Many of the fighters there included Jelani from Al-Qaeda in Iraq, went up there to fight against the Sunnis. This was treason, clearly.
But she said she's sending it all over to the Justice Department. So, okay, so here we go. Are you actually going to prosecute any of them? I mean, she specifically names Barack Obama, James Comey, James Clapper, and John Brennan. So this is the Director of National Intelligence, the head of the FBI director, the CIA director, and the President of the United States. That's pretty high level.
And guess what? Clapper's never going to go down for lying in front of Congress that there was no mass bulk data collection by the NSA of any type, warrantless collection. He said that boldly in front of Congress. Did he have to apologize? No. Did he get charged with any crime? No. What did he get? He got a reward. He became a CNN analyst of some sort. And he's never going to have to face justice for that. I don't think he's going to have to face justice for this.
So, okay. Which one of them's getting prosecuted first? I don't know about you, Rob, but like my patience is running kind of thin with this administration constantly dangling where there's actually going to be some accountability
Right.
for these elites and for their, their instrument organizations, and never getting any. Not like we're getting some, but not all of it. Getting none of it. None of it. I know there was an FBI, one FBI lawyer got arrested, or he got charged and convicted, but didn't do jail time, I believe. He was the one who actually forged not forged, he misled the FISA courts. This was the guy who basically what happened was they were framing Carter Page, who was like a low-level Trump advisor. They were framing him for being a Russian spy. This was the claim. And the CIA explicitly told him that he wasn't. And they omitted that from their, or even I think that it was worse than omitted that. They actually said the CIA confirmed their information, which technically was true, but they confirmed, like the FBI was like, we suspect that he was meeting with the Russians. And then the CIA told us, oh yeah. No, he's an asset for us. He did meet with the Russians, but he came back and debriefed us on it. And then when they were when they were presenting their FISA application, they told the FISA court that we suspect he met with the Russians, and the CIA confirmed this is true.
Yeah, these people are vile. They're just trying to take down Trump. And you guys know, you see this channel, you watch my videos, you know I'm not a fan of Trump, but this was an underhanded scheme of the worst possible proportions, and it wasn't, made that way by the elected election and the electoral process. It wasn't Americans standing up and saying, hey, we're going to vote for all these representatives that want to do this to Trump. No, this was the deep state wielding power and holding a scythe over the head of Trump, trying to, threaten him and take him down ultimately. Which,
like, they did, but they confirmed it to debunk the whole need for this FISA warrant to begin with. So that guy got arrested, didn't do jail time, but was convicted. Other than that, nobody's been held accountable. And I just don't buy it. I don't buy that this is going to happen. So if this is their like, hey, you guys of the world, like, no, stick with us. We're still going to hold the deep state accountable. Like, okay, let's see it. You said you got all the evidence you need. Okay. When are the indictments coming down? Let me know when the trial date's going to be for Barack Obama, because I don't think there's going to be one.
No, there's not going to be one whatsoever. We all know that's true. That's not how government works. That's not how government operates. That's why it's the uniparty. Even when there's fierce rhetoric that makes, fans of Trump at times question it, like he really is going to root out the evil that persists in the permanent state bureaucracy, it's not going to happen. It's the uniparty. They cover for each other. There's too many close relations between them. Lobbies intersect with them. There's Venn diagrams in terms of power dynamics and different institutions interwoven into all this. And they're not going to be held accountable. There's no way Trump is going to push down charges on people at that high of a level. Maybe people at slightly lower levels, but I don't think that will even happen in this case. This is theatrics designed to take the attention of the American people, and specifically Trump supporters, off of the Epstein story, because that was significant pushback. Dave's right about that. One thing he said at the beginning that's sticking with me is the fact that Trump had to tweet about the fact that, the Epstein story really isn't losing me approval ratings. Well, tweeting that means that the Epstein story is losing you approval ratings, specifically among your base. We see that have played out in polls. We see that with top influencers not only questioning, but condemning Trump for how he's dealt with this and the Trump administration in general. True, some people are trying to even spin that by saying, oh, hey, it's Trump's advisors that are misleading him on this and misguiding him on this. But if you're a dissident, you know the truth. It's been Trump that's come out and said, why are you talking about this? This is a Democratic hoax. There's nothing here. That's Trump. This deep state isn't trying to take Trump down via a Russiagate scheme right now. Trump's appointed the new leadership of the deep state that exists. The Ratcliffes, Gabbards, Dan Bongino's, Kash Patel's, Pam Bondi. That's Trump's responsibility now. And yeah, there are terrible forces within the deep state beneath them in siloed bureaucracies. That has to be true. But they're not trying to drum up a Russiagate scheme now. They don't seem to have the same power they did against Trump as in his first term. So yeah, this is a deflection from the Epstein story, and we shouldn't stop clamoring about the Epstein story because of it. The Epstein story needs more attention all the time, as far as I'm concerned, because they're covering up a child sex trafficking ring. It's not just a pedophilia ring. That likely was an intelligence operation. And until we get the answers on that, no one's going to be satisfied. We know that more evidence exists than they're willing to divulge to the public. And it's going to be that way. This is going to go down to hurt Trump in the midterms if there isn't more transparency. I think that's inevitable now. But it's not just this. He's rearming Ukraine, and we had the war in Iran, and he had a famous schism with Musk. He's clearly not serious about cutting spending. It's all these things acting in concert, but I do think that Epstein and the Epstein story and how Trump's handled that has caused the biggest schism amongst his supporters so far. I think that the polls show that and bear that out. But I do want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below. Is Dave Smith right? Is the Russiagate news a deflection from the Epstein story? What have you learned from the Russiagate scandal? Do you think that this Epstein story will eventually go away? Let me know down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Dave. He's probably the best libertarian voice out there in the universe right now. And please consider becoming a YouTube member of mine. Click the join button below and you'll support the channel. And in return, I'm going to give you access to all my videos before they go live on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.